today we're talking about what you should do when you first get a dog. And this is going to range from when you first get, like, either you're getting a puppy from a breeder. This is also going to range to people that are adopting dogs from like the pound or shelters or rescues, those types of scenarios. I think a lot of people, when they first get a dog, they're very much wanting to like hurry up and like go to a trainer and really work on like obedience and can my dog walk on a leash, and all those things are important, but I think a lot of people are missing some more of like the foundational things that I believe kind of trump the obedience part of it, because I feel like a lot of dogs lately, or in general, and I feel like probably since COVID, to be honest with you, struggle a lot with like anxiety, or they're nervous of new places, new things. There's kind of lacking that confidence. And obviously for some dogs, it's definitely a genetic thing. But I also think some dogs are just not exposed and aren't, put into certain situations that then help them as they get older, opposed to they're older dogs now and then end up struggling with these issues that could have been, I'm not going to say fully prevented, because again, it depends on the dog, but could have maybe been prevented if, what they did when they were younger were to help. And then also I feel like with rescue dogs and shelter dogs, specifically, I feel like they don't really get the benefit of the doubt. I feel like, a lot of times people expect them to be, easier, or like, not have as much difficulty with like settling in a house and those types of things. And I feel like that's very unfair to those dogs, and also just kind of moving at the speed of the dog. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to start with puppies first, and then we'll kind of get into rescue dogs. And I will also be using like own examples of stuff that I do with my own dogs as well, that can be maybe a little bit relatable, or kind of give you an idea of what I'm kind of talking about. But with dogs that are puppies, I feel like the biggest mistake is everyone's, rushing to, okay, well, they bark, they cry, they are potting on the floor, which these are all things that puppies are going to do when you first get them. But the big thing is going to be getting them on a good routine and a good schedule to kind of help eliminate some of that stuff. So the first thing I will say is your 8-week-old puppy for sure is going to bark and cry in the crate. That's, I feel like, for the most part, universal. I know you have your like special butterflies or your unicorns or whatever you want to call them, that they're from day one perfect in a crate, they don't cry at all, they don't have any accidents. Like, you do have puppies that are like that, but I wouldn't say that's the standard, if that makes any sense. So a big thing is like, don't fret, your puppy's gonna cry, they're gonna scream. For me, when they're that little, you gotta let them cry it out when they're in the crate. That's just how it is. And especially if you think about it, they're going through a lot of changes. So you're taking away from their mom, their siblings, depending on where you're getting the dog to. You're, either flying them on a plane to come to a new state, you're driving to go get them, all of those things. So there's a lot of stuff happening within such a short time frame, and their whole world is essentially being flipped upside down, so to speak. So it's very important to remember that stuff. But when you're first getting your puppy, the biggest thing I would say is obviously, one, getting them on a good crate routine. Essentially, crate training is potty training. So getting them comfortable in the crate and then taking them out pretty often when they're super young. You don't want to leave them unsupervised either, especially an 8 to 16-week-old dog, even younger, or even a little bit older than that. I wouldn't leave unsupervised, but between that age, you definitely need to be using your crate pretty consistently. So things like for bedtime, when you leave the house, I'll even kind of put my puppy in a crate randomly throughout the day if I'm home, while I'm doing things, to kind of get used to, okay, there's things going on in the kitchen, there's things going on in the living room, but they don't always have to be, right underneath your feet, always with you. And then for me too, with the puppy, it's just sometimes hard to kind of keep your eye on them 24/7. So that crate can kind of be helpful of a spot for them to go and kind of relax in. And then also is feeding them in the crate. So it kind of continues to be a positive association for them. So they go in there, they get their meals. It's a good spot that they want to go into. Another thing too that I really like to use with puppies is those little like X pen, play pen things. I love to have those, so it can kind of give them a little bit more space and like freedom besides just being in a crate. And with that is you can put, some other like toys and things for them to kind of keep themselves occupied with. I really like to use the X Pen anywhere from 8 to about 16 weeks is pushing it. I'd say like about 8 to 14 weeks. And it also is going to depend on the dog. And for me, is your puppy might at first like jump up on like the edge of the little pen. So I definitely will correct them for that. Like, I'll grab them by their collar, tell them no, take them and get them off of the side of the exercise pen. Just because you don't want them crashing on that and it falls down and hurts them. And then also learning that they can just kind of hang out and exist in there. Now, with your playpen too, you don't want that to be associated with an area that they get to use the bathroom in. So you're still going to need to take them out pretty frequently to avoid, having accidents and those types of things. So the exercise pen is huge. And then also if you're integrating a new puppy when there's already existing dogs in the house, so they can kind of smell each other, be around each other, but they're not necessarily interacting head on quite yet. And I'm not saying with like your older dog that you have to like keep them separated, but also it's important to note that not every single dog is going to like puppies. I love puppies, but puppies are annoying, and especially for like older dogs sometimes as well. So just being aware of that and making sure that your older dog that you have is stable and is not going to retaliate or hurt the puppy. It's also good for your older dog to correct the puppy if they're being too much. But again, there's got to be that fine line too. If you have a dog that's going to correct too much or be a little bit unfair, then that's something you kind of need to, keep an eye on and be aware of. So those are a couple things like in the house that are super important. And then also is going to be taking your puppy out and about and kind of exposing them to new places, new people, new sounds, those types of scenarios. Now, obviously, you need to be careful with this because between the ages of 8 to 12 weeks or 16 weeks, obviously your dog is not fully vaccinated. So taking them when there's not as many high traffic areas as far as like other dogs, I wouldn't be like setting them down in like the park and the grass there, because again, if a dog's gone to the bathroom or has, parasites and all that bad stuff, you don't want to expose your puppy to that stuff. But when they're super little, it's easy to carry them and kind of take them places and just kind of expose them to the sounds and sights of new things. And then once they kind of start getting more of their vaccines and everything, like for me, once they're at that 12-week mark, I'll start kind of letting them be on the ground in certain areas. And then also my biggest thing is, err on the side of caution. I always want to say in these scenarios, like, don't take what I say as, the correct thing, but just speaking on my own dogs, like I'll take them to, lower traffic dog areas once they've got that second vaccine, because they still have something to kind of protect them. But again, it's super important to expose them because there are so many dogs that are extremely under socialized, and it's really hard to really fix that stuff if a dog's been doing that for a long period of time. And again, not saying that's not fixable, but it's nice to kind of start out strong when they're super little. And again, not be too worried about like the foundation, like can they walk on a leash and sit and down, that stuff's great. But when they're that little, my biggest thing is socializing and then also playing with your dogs, so really building a relationship with them. So, if they have like a little ball or a little rope toy, those types of scenarios where the puppy is doing something with you and it's fun for them, it's fun for you, and you're kind of working as a team together and really building that relationship. So play is going to be a super big thing to utilize. And this would be with really any dog, but especially when you first get them when they're little puppies and stuff. That's super important. So those are a couple things. And the big thing too is just gonna be patience. Like, it's not going to happen overnight. And once you really get out of, the harder puppy phase, life gets easier with a puppy, and it gets to be more enjoyable too. So if you're, in the trenches of puppyhood, you're going to make it through. The nice thing about dogs is it doesn't last that long. So once they kind of get a good foundation and, a good routine and everything, life gets pretty easy. So if you're in that stage, you will make it, I promise. But yeah, I'd say those are the biggest things when it comes to puppies. And then obviously too, making sure you're taking them to their vet appointments and kind of getting them checked out, especially if you're getting a puppy from a breeder. Typically they'll give you like I think it's like a 24 to 48 hour period of time to where you can get them kind of like looked over by your vet to make sure they're like cleared health wise, making sure, their eyes look good and like there's no big health concerns, because some breeders, if there is, you can get your money back if there's an issue with the puppy and those types of scenarios. So I would definitely, if you have that option, and most reputable breeders, I feel like that I've worked with anyways, it's like that. So definitely take advantage of that if that's something your breeder offers you, just to make sure your puppy is healthy and good to go, because the health of the dog is obviously, in my opinion, the number one thing before really anything else. So those are a couple things that I would definitely be implementing if you're getting a puppy or you just got a puppy. I think that's really it for puppies. And then obviously as they start to get older, definitely like putting a little bit more boundaries and rules and structure is super huge. And then starting to kind of implement the obedience and everything. And obedience, there is some things I will start doing with them when they're super little, but it's not everything. And I don't want to fixate and expect perfection when they're that little. Really, it's making them feel confident, building a relationship with you, and just getting a good potty routine scheduled down is the big thing. And then once they get older, you can kind of start building on more things. Because in my opinion, especially for like the average dog owner, and what I mean by that is people that just want to have a dog as like a pet, as a companion, those types of things, is I would rather the dog be well behaved than well trained, as the fact that they can you know be in the world, exist, not have any huge issues. And obviously again, genetics plays a big part in it, so you could do all the right things and your dog can still be reactive, aggressive, and have issues. It's not always in how you're raising and the things that you're doing with them. Sometimes it's how the cookie kind of crumbles, so that's something to also keep in mind. You can do all the right things and sometimes it doesn't always. I'm not gonna say it doesn't always matter, but kind of. um, and that's where what was I gonna I'll get back to that point in a second, but that's where you can do all the right things and stuff can still happen. So don't worry about all of that. But definitely exposure, crate training, all that good stuff. And now I'm going to go more into like if you're rescuing more like an older dog. So like this is going to be like more for like a 1-year-old and plus dog that you're getting from a rescue or shelter. So the big thing, and I was fostering a dog last summer. I had a rescue. Yeah, I had a rescue that was fostering. And the big thing for me, that's the number one thing, is when you first get a rescue dog, and I'm specifically speaking to if you're getting a dog more from like the shelter and stuff, where they don't really, they have a ton of dogs. I feel like they just can't, give every single dog everything they need, unfortunately, and that's just how it works right now. But my biggest thing would be getting the dog checked out from a veterinarian pretty soon after you've adopted it. I just know like the foster that I had, he was literally a street dog. I don't know if he ever lived in a house until I got him, but he was a literal street dog. Like didn't know how to function in the house. Like he would look for holes in the fence to like escape. Like he was like, I'm not gonna say feral, but kind of. Um, and he had a very weird personality. And again, I don't know if it's just because he was like shy and nervous. I don't know if, just genetics. There's a lot of things that, play into that. But he had a very just somber, like super chill dog. And I was like asking the rescue, I'm like, hey, like, can we get him like checked out by a vet? Like he came from Maricopa County, came from the street, like don't really know his whole background, obviously. And my biggest thing is, especially depending on where you live, is going to be, testing for things that are more prominent within your area. So, like for us in Arizona, a big thing is valley fever. And the big thing for me is testing, getting blood work done on the dog, getting a fecal on the dog, making sure they're negative for parasites, those type scenarios, and making sure the dog is healthy. Because, again, when they're coming from, these high, heavily populated shelters and stuff where they just don't have the means or the ability to really take very, very good care of these dogs, I think that's something important to note, and making sure your dog is good in all of those aspects. And even too with like parasites and stuff, they might not show up 2 months later. So getting them in, getting a fecal done, making sure they're clear of everything. And not only is that important for the dog that you just adopted, but then also if you're having other dogs in your home, like your own personal dogs, making sure you're able to keep your dog safe. Because in my opinion, that quarantine period when you first get a new dog, especially from like county or shelters, you need to stick with that. You can just end up giving your dog some pretty nasty things, as far as like kennel cough, distemper is a big one. So making sure you're keeping them, separated for a little bit. And again, this is going to be different too. Like I know there are some, rescues where they have fosters and stuff and they're more like in a home environment, and that type of scenario where we might not need to be as cautious. But again, this is going to be more geared towards like you're getting the dog from the shelter. Like these are things I would say are non-negotiable when you're getting a dog from these types of situations. So that would be the number one thing. To really, figure out and make sure everything is good. And then when you do get the dog, you need to realize there's going to be like a decompression period for them. So they went from a high stress, situation to now coming to you. So really allowing the dog to settle into a new routine and get used to you. And my big thing is, and this goes for puppies and older dogs, but I don't want to just right off the bat give the dog all this freedom to kind of just roam around and do whatever in the house. So using a leash and collar is going to be huge. And this is more specifically geared towards like you get an older dog that's not really need to be in an X pen, but you need to be able to give some form of kind of communication when they're out in the house. So I highly recommend using a leash and collar. And this is one, so the dog isn't able to like get into things, counter surf, you're able to kind of stop some of those things, but then also so the dog can bond and spend time with you. Because if you have an independent dog, and that's kind of what I had last year when I was fostering, super independent dog, he wanted nothing to do with me, didn't find any really pleasure, I'd say, from people. He just kind of wanted to go do his own thing. That leash made it to where he had to interact with me, and he didn't really have a choice but to spend time with me. And you don't need to overcomplicate it with the leash and collar in the house. Literally, if you have like a hands-free leash or like one of those ones that can clip around your waist, or like a carabiner clip, like just something so you can kind of be hands-free. Because I will say it's annoying to have to like have the leash in your hand and like dragging the dog around with you. So having something to where you can kind of keep your hands free, do what you need to do, and the dog's just kind of like in your bubble, is super, super important. Now, it's important to note as well, that's not going to be a forever thing. So like the leash and collar in the house, when I'm saying this, it's not like, okay, the dog is forever going to be on the leash in the house and never going to like be able to just be a dog. But it's super huge in the very beginning stages, just so you can reinforce things, spend time with the dog. And then also, again, if you're having a dog that's never lived in a house, you may have a dog that's going to be anxious in the house, might not be fully potty trained. So the leash is going to eliminate a lot of those, behaviors in the beginning. And then just so you can kind of keep an eye on the dog too. So that would be the next big thing I would say after you get your dog, checked out by the vet. They're healthy, they're good to go. And then the big thing with that as well is going to be utilizing your crate, because when you're adopting a dog too, you don't know, are they going to destroy things? Are they going to get into things? And again, when dogs are in a new environment that they're not used to, they can be a little bit more maybe destructive than what they normally would be. So that crate's going to eliminate your dog getting into things that could be harmful for them. I feel like a lot of people think, okay, well, I'm putting my dog in a crate, like it's mean, it's a cage, like they're a bad dog and I'm not allowing the dog to have freedom. For me, the crate is more of a safety net, because at the end of the day, and I feel like I say this a lot, but like dogs are dogs. So my dog might be phenomenal in the house, never get anything, never pee in the house, whatever. And then there might be that one day where my dog gets into something or, has an accident in the house, those types of scenarios. So for me, that crate is just that safe space. And especially when you have a new dog that you don't really know much about, that crate is going to be a big training tool that you're going to utilize. Now, again, not every single dog is going to love the crate, but again, sometimes you gotta put the dog in a little bit more of a stressful situation in order to then move on and have a good healthy relationship too. So what might start out stressful for the dog in the beginning, they're going to end up being comfortable and fine being in there. I've had a few dogs that have come from like shelters and things like that within the last year and a half that I've been doing my own thing. And a lot of times those dogs start out being anxious and nervous in the crate, but as they get exercise, they get to be in a house, they have someone paying attention to them, they typically then start to settle down in the crate. And again, I'm not going to say that's every single dog, because I will say throughout my time training dogs and everything, I've probably had about maybe 3 or 4 dogs that just were terrible in a crate. And I'm talking like terrible as in like trying to hurt themselves, causing harm to themselves. And in those situations, yes, you need to outweigh the pros and the cons. If your dog is literally like hurting themselves, probably not a good thing to use with the dog. The other part of that too is the struggle of if your dog hurts itself in the crate and then they're also wanting to destroy things in the house. Again, that's one of those things where you got to kind of outweigh the pros and the cons. But getting them used to being in the crate and putting it in a more like low key area. So I wouldn't put it, where there's a ton of people coming in and out, where the dog's not going to be able to settle and like calm down and relax. And I feel like if you don't have a lot of people over, like you could put your crate in the living room, but if you're someone that like always has friends and company over, I would probably put it in like a spare bedroom or your room, or somewhere it's just not going to be stressful for the dog, and where they can just really decompress. Because really that's what I want the crate to be, is like you go and you relax and take a nap in there. It's not somewhere where your dog should be constantly pacing and all over the place. And again too, that's also going to vary on the type of dog that you have. Like for me, like my Malinois, they pace in the crate, not all the time, but like if they hear something or if like I'm getting up to do something, they'll start to pace in there. That's just kind of how they are. But ideally they should be pretty, settled and calm when they're in their crate. So that would be one of the other things that you would want to be ready and prepared for when getting any dog really, but also getting a dog from the shelter and stuff. And then when it comes to like, what do you do after the fact that you get a shelter dog or rescue dog? For me is I wouldn't like feel like you need to keep them confined to like your house. I feel like that's honestly one of the worst things that you could do with a new dog in a new environment. I think it's important to still take them out and do things with them. Now, again, this is also going to depend on the situation. So if you're getting a dog from the shelter that's been exposed to a lot of things, for sure they need to probably stay in your house the next 14 days quarantined, just to make sure that they don't have anything and they're not going to give anything to any other dogs, especially if you're going like to a park and situations like that. But we're going to say once you're past that kind of quarantine period portion of things, I definitely think it's super important to be taking your dog out on walks, taking to the park, like exposing them to new things and not just keeping them locked up in the house and confined. Even if it's just like you have a backyard and stuff, I think it's still important for the dog to get out and see the world. Again, if you're having a dog that's just been in a shelter and hasn't been exposed to much, I think that is very, very huge, and making them feel better about themselves. And in those scenarios too, like when I had the dog that I was fostering last year's name was Clancy. I'll just refer to him as Clancy. With Clancy, his first few, little training sessions, if that's what you want to call them, was really just walking, literally putting him on a leash and like, we're going to walk and just hang out together. And that was really all that it was for the first little bit, because that's what he needed at the time. And that was what was more important than, okay, can he walk nice in a leash? Can he sit? Can he down? And I think with his situation that made it very difficult is they were putting him on the what's it called? Basically he was going to be euthanized because he refused to like walk. He didn't want to like be with people. He would like freak out on the leash. And so when I got him, that was the reason why, is they're like, we need someone that's kind of experienced, which really he wasn't that bad. I feel like if you had a dog before, you could have worked with him. Like he wasn't like the worst dog in the world by any stretch of the means, but it was just getting him to walk and follow me and kind of just taking him around walks in the neighborhood and just getting him used to everything. So, and obviously be smart about it. Like I'm not going to take a new dog that I got to OSO on a Saturday at 10 a.m. You know what I mean? So, but definitely don't feel like you need to confine them to the house, because I think that's one of the worst things that you can do, is kind of treat them like a hermit almost, where they can't leave and go do anything. And that's where I wouldn't be worried about, are they walking nicely on the walk? Like, and it's one thing too, if you're adopting a giant dog and they're dragging you down and it's actually going to be dangerous, okay, then you need to get the dog railed in a little bit, or reeled in a little bit. But if it's, the dog's kind of pulling you, it's not the most pleasant thing, but it's not out of control. That's something that you can start to build and add once you've had a better relationship with the dog and they kind of get settled in and kind of acclimated to everything. So that's a big one. And then as well, like, again, playing with them, again, getting them used to you, finding what they do like, what they don't like. And this might take a little bit of time, especially with the rescue dog. Like with Clancy, I tried getting him to play with like toys and stuff. And like for the first, like, I don't know, probably the first month, I had him for 3 months, I want to say. The first like month and a half, he wanted nothing to do with toys. Food, he could really care less about that. I would like hand feed him and stuff. He would eat here and there, but he was just extremely, extremely picky and difficult in those situations. But after like about a month, he finally was like showing interest in toys. He'd start to play with them. He'd start to bring them back to me. So that was really like a turning point for him. And again, that took him a whole month to get to that point. So when you're freaking out and worried about, your dog that you just adopted, like, relax. Like it might seem like the end of the world in the beginning, but it's really not. And again, depending on like what your dog has been through, because that's the other part of it. Like understanding where your dog came from and like what they might struggle with because of that, I think is super important, but I wouldn't use that as an excuse for everything. So like for instance, like with Clancy, I wasn't like, oh well, you're a street dog and you've never been in a house before, so like it's fine, we're just gonna kind of let you do whatever. He still had a lot of structure and everything, but again, I wasn't beating myself up about, you know, little hiccups here and there. So that's the other thing that you need to be keep in mind. And again, it might take time. Like a lot of these dogs sometimes just need the time and someone that's going to do something with them, because a lot of times they've just never been given a chance, unfortunately. And there are lots of great dogs that, you know, could make people very happy and are very just biddable dogs, but they just aren't given the time of day. And that was kind of how he was, because once he really kind of got used to being in the house and everything, like this is like the easiest dog ever. Like he was good with other dogs, he was neutral with people, like he wasn't extremely outgoing, but he like was fine with people. Like no real behavioral issues, he was easy to handle. And again, for a dog that didn't grow up in a house or like in a normal, you know, situation like most dogs, like he wasn't bad at all. So take your time, don't rush it. Now if you want to work with the trainer and everything, I think that's great, and being proactive about that stuff. But I think a lot of times our priorities aren't necessarily 100% where they should be. Like again, I feel like I've had people in the past where they'll reach out to me, they've just adopted a dog hasn't been to a vet, hasn't been checked out, isn't, you know, probably the healthiest. I'm like, okay, as much as, you know, the training is an important part of the puzzle piece, I personally don't think it's the most important thing when you're first getting a dog. So um you know, being aware of that stuff and kind of keeping that in mind is huge. And once your dog is settled in, they know you, then I definitely think that's where it's a little bit more valuable if you want to work with a trainer to, you know, help you with some of the basic things, or maybe then you are starting to kind of figure out some like behavioral issues that you're having for sure. Then you might need some help with either private lessons or you want to do a board and train or whatever the case may be with your dog. And then a lot of this stuff too, like basic obedience stuff, is stuff that you can look up online. Like I do train dogs for a living and it's what I do, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily across the board that everyone needs to have a trainer. It's something nice to have for sure, but I don't feel like, you know, in some situations, I don't always think it's necessary. It also depends on the people too. It depends if you're someone that wants to teach the dog yourself, you're someone that wants to kind of be the dog trainer to your dog. And you know, then there's some people where they need a little bit more help, or they want their dog to have a little more of an immersive program. And it really depends on the dog, the owner, those type of scenarios. So I think that's also something to kind of keep in mind. But across the board, I would say there's a lot more things that are important before just going straight into, okay, I need my dog to be, you know, trained. So those are the big things I would say. I feel like that's all I really have to touch on today. I've been thinking about this a lot because I've had a lot of people, you know, either just adopting dogs that are kind of asking for tips, or have just gotten puppies and they're like, okay, I have this new puppy and it's difficult, and they're like, we were so excited, and obviously they still love the dog, but they're like, okay, now do we make like a mistake because of all the work that goes into it? So puppies are definitely not for the faint of heart. They're a lot of work. They're worth it. But it's definitely something where you're gonna be in the trenches through a little bit, and you need to be patient with the puppy, because they're just doing, you know, what puppies do. So, and then obviously as the puppies get older, I am a big, again, proponent of using a leash and collar in the house. And then again, your dog isn't going to live on a leash and collar in the house forever, but they got to learn what the expectations are in the house, because if you think about it, they're living in our world, which isn't very normal for them. And so at the end of the day, most dogs, I would say, because there are bad dogs in the world, but most dogs typically aren't bad dogs. They've just never been A, told what to do, and B, had someone put the time and effort into them, right? I think a lot of times we think, okay, we just get a dog and then we can turn them loose and then they'll figure it out. No, we've got to put that time to show them, all right, here's what I expect out of the house. You're not allowed to do this. You are allowed to do this. And I definitely think there is a little bit of management in the beginning, because again, they have to learn that they can't jump on the countertop, they can't be on the furniture, whatever the case is, because then this is also going to be pertaining to your lifestyle and, you know, what you do and do not want to allow your dog to be doing in the house. Like some people don't mind if their dog's on the furniture, some people do. So those are all things that you kind of have to decide for yourself, and then, you know, set that expectation for your dog. but I think it's super important that you have that leash and collar to kind of give that structure and give that feedback. And again, you'll get to a point where your dog has a lot of freedom, or I should say, most dogs will, because again, you have your dogs that just sometimes might not be able to have certain freedoms or whatever, the case may be. But generally speaking, you're going to get to that point. But again, you just have to put the time into them. And I will say, I feel like a lot of dogs, like once they hit like 2.5, 3, I feel like that's where you're kind of in like the golden phase where it's like they know everything, they've kind of calmed down a little bit, they've kind of grown up a little bit, and then it just makes life a little bit easier. I definitely feel like the first year for sure can be a lot. And I also think too, a lot of people feel like they need to like give their dogs constant like toys or like enrichment like items, like the like snuffle mats and the Kongs and all that stuff, which I'm not saying that stuff's bad, but I definitely wouldn't say like that is actually, really fulfilling your dog. I definitely think, again, letting them run around out in the backyard, taking them for walks, playing with them, like that is going to be more enriching for your dog than, just kind of giving them something to do in the house. Obviously, occupying them and, giving them little treats and stuff like that is fine, but I don't think that's in replacement of doing all the other things. And I think some people forget that. And again, too, it's going to depend on the breed. So if you have a high drive, dog, like, I don't know, like a field lab or a Malinois or a German Shepherd, or I'm trying to think of more high drive, Jack Russell Terriers, really any terrier, breeds like that, a little Kong and going for a walk in the neighborhood probably isn't going to be enough. So kind of keeping that in mind and making sure that you're also, picking a dog that's going to fit your lifestyle, and also realizing too is there are, you know, pros and cons to having dogs, and there are things that you might not have thought of that then come up. So again, like instances where your dog might be reactive, or they might resource guard, or they might not be great with people, or they might not be good with other dogs. So these are definitely things to kind of keep in mind. And then that's also too, if you're getting a dog from a breeder, making sure you're going through somebody that's responsible. And just because they're listed on the AKC website does not mean they're a responsible breeder. Do they health test? What do they do with their dogs? Are you allowed to come to where the dogs are kept and like see them? Are you allowed to meet the parents? Are you allowed to see, if they have titles and everything like that? And again, titles aren't everything, but showing that they actually do something with their dogs and their dogs are proven. And again, health testing is a big one too, and making sure you're looking at what is that breed more prone to. So like, for example, with like Malinois, they're more prone to, they can have seizures, they can have hip issues, elbow issues, all that good, I shouldn't say good stuff, but all that stuff. So keeping in mind what issues that breed can have, or like your Cavalier King Charles are always prone to like heart issues, or like Dobermans, they're prone to heart issues. So keeping that in mind, and then realizing too the vet care that's going to come along with that stuff as well. So they're going to probably need to go see a cardiologist every year, or however that works. I haven't had any dogs with any heart issues, knock on wood, but keeping those things in mind, and the upkeep and the maintenance is a big thing. And then also too, when you're rescuing a dog, you can have dogs that might not have any health issues. When you rescue a dog, you might have some that are going to have a whole load of issues as far as health wise. So really keeping that in mind. And again, too, even if you're going to be rescuing a dog, doing your research, because I've had a lot of people where they'll like rescue like a pitty or rescue a Doberman, and they're like, oh, like his skin issues are terrible, like I don't know what's going on. And a lot of those breeds are prone to having skin issues. So kind of doing your research where that stuff is concerned, because a lot of it typically I feel like is common depending on the dog that you get, but being aware and being prepared, for things that you didn't think were going to happen is super important, a big thing when you're getting a dog. I don't think getting a dog should be something that you do on a whim, because you do have your easy dogs, but then you do have dogs that come with a lot of either baggage, health issues, that type of thing, and it makes it a little bit more challenging. So that's also something to kind of keep in mind as well. But I think those are the main points I wanted to kind of touch on today. And yeah, so I think I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to quit chit-chatting, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.